Hello. And welcome to Durries&Discussion. I am your host, Kezia Warren, and today I wanted to change speed. I'm out here in the garden, and I am doing two things. I am pulling out weeds and sorting out bits of rubbish, trash for our American audiences, behind my family's shed. I love weeding. Weeding feels grounding, and it is grounding. That is to say, I am literally on the ground. I am grounded. If every action has an equal and opposite reaction, that means everything must be acting against each other in some way or some form. So therefore, the ground is acting upon me. And given that I have, at this moment, no better words, or no more precise words, let's get rid of the idea of better and worse. Given that I have no more precise language than to say, for which to say what the ground is doing, or for what to say the ground is doing to me, let's say it is grounding me. The ground is grounding, and the Kez is Kezing. Recently, I hit burnout, and I have talked about that a few times on this channel, as well as to my followers on Instagram and Facebook, the meta platforms that I use to share updates and art updates of what I'm doing as an artist, and art from me as an artist, as well as sharing reels and slides that are relevant to things going on in the world or topics that are important. At least topics that I value. And I value them for a myriad of reasons. But anyway, I'm weeding. And cleaning. One of the most valuable things in my sphere of understanding. That is to say, what I have learned to value probably the most throughout my journey as an artist, especially in the last 5 years, is nature. Or in other words, the environment. Or, in other words, creation. Some people might say the universe. I would call myself one of those people, because I am one of those people. There's a golden honey eater, what is commonly known as a golden honey eater. I don't know it's the taxonomy term for this bird. Maybe someone in the comments can say, but it is a, or they are, because I value the divinity and the personhood of animals. The common name for that bird is a golden honey eater, or a yellow honey eater. Anyway, welcome to Durries&Discussion. We're 6 minutes in. Hopefully I haven't lost you. The goal of this idea, Durries&Discussion, is to be mindful and to be unedited and to share my thoughts in a way that is earnest and hopefully honest. Now, I say hopefully honest because I am aware of myself and my own ability to avoid being honest for the sake of my own survival. What I've learned from psychology is that avoidance can be, or is, considered a unhealthy coping mechanism. And in truth, it is a way that I cope with many of the difficult feelings that I have at various times. I am often uncomfortable in expressing myself openly and honestly, especially, but not limited to, excuse me, I can be avoidant when in person. I can be avoidant about things in person with people who I might think those things are maybe controversial or sensitive topics for those people. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. I hope I'm communicating effectively here. I struggle a lot with intrusive thoughts, as well as obsessive thinking, recursive thinking. And so, gardening, especially weeding, which, to be honest, I think is maybe the largest and one of the most important yet undervalued aspects of gardening. The term yard maintenance is a popular phrase. And when people think of yard maintenance, they think of mowing the lawn. They might think of cutting back weeds, pruning hedges. They might think of using tools or chemicals, pesticides, for example, in order to maintain an aesthetic garden. That is, a garden for the sake of looking at. Does my garden look pretty? Well then, if it doesn't, mind the dog. Banjo. Hello. This is Banjo. Hello, Banjo. Banjo, what you doing? Banjo is a very sociable dog. Banjo is a Kelpie, a very popular breed in my part of the world. I say my part of the world for simplicity. Where I live, I would struggle to call mine without feeling unethical. Truly, where I dropped a piece of glass in there, hence my it'll be okay, because glass is at least a glass is at least, well, the type of glass, it's not sharp. It's a piece of a bottle, I think, and glass at least breaks down and is a non-toxic substance when it comes to gardening or propagating plants. Gardening is an interesting term, and you'll forgive me, this is Durries&Discussion is a stream of consciousness experiment. I speak freely where my mind goes. Gardening is a funny term now that I think on it, or while I'm thinking on it, because in essence, gardening is an abstraction of agriculturalism. Agriculturalism being related to agriculture, and agriculture being the practice of propagating plants for food. Gardening, of course, comes with the connotations of, as I said before, aesthetic. A garden, as opposed to a farm, is commonly thought of as an outside space that is small and personal. Sometimes they can be quite large, but maybe not for the sake of food propagation, but more for the sake of, as I said, aesthetic. Pretty flowers, neat hedgerows, raised garden beds. And while I value the feng shui, let's say, for lack of better words, of a well-kept space for the sake of accessibility for myself and others, I most value gardening for the sake of life. Now that might seem strange. You might think, cares? Don't all people garden for the sake of life? And then there might be others who say, no, of course not. Gardening is for the sake of habit, mindfulness. Aesthetic. To me, gardening is just a word for getting outside, putting my hands in the dirt, moving plants around for the purpose of making life better or more productive for people and animals. As I said before about the golden honeyeater that was around before, I value the divinity and personhood of animals. I rarely partake of eating animal products. And now that isn't to score points. However, I must admit, or at least I feel called to admit, that sometimes I can be tempted to think that I have more divinity, more rights, more validity, or a higher moral standing than those who eat animal products, or predominantly eat animal products.
You haven't got the big clippers?
No, they are One moment. Hello, I'm back. A lot of people, I think, don't value slow tasks. Because I think maybe I could do it quicker and get a faster result, and then, you know, then I can move on to better things. And I'm certainly prone to that, what I would call temptation. However, as someone who has had fast relationships, as someone who has rushed creative projects, and as someone who frequently pops a pimple that maybe they should simply, you know, sometimes I pop a pimple when maybe I should just wash my face, or, you know, put some toothpaste and a bandage or whatever, you know, some essential oil on it. What I'm saying is I know I in myself know the value of taking time, and I've been afforded that understanding by having been granted a lot of time. And the things that have granted me time, well, the financial situation that I was born into, the family that I was born into, the privileges that I was born into gave me that. And it's about circumstance. It's not about simple answers or fast solutions. It's about taking time to examine what privilege is, not simply what we are told privilege is. So what is privilege? Privilege is something someone is given. Reward is something someone earns. And I'm not about to tell you what people do and don't deserve. Quite frankly, because I don't want to right now. All I can say, or all I will say at this moment, is that the privilege of having been afforded time thanks to let's be honest, my skin color in a white settler colony. I know that is a controversial thing to say. I know some people will go, oh, well, I don't know what people will do necessarily, but I know that it's a controversial thing to say. And I know that it can seem stuck up or wishy-washy or needlessly political. However, I do think it is important to acknowledge the fact that I do live in a white settler colony. What does that mean? A white settler colony? Well, it means that I live in a part of the world that was settled by light-skinned Europeans where institutionally, governmentally, and religiously a philosophy that people who are of light skin are of higher value or more important have been implemented or are implemented, or that if they are not expressly implemented, they are indirectly implemented because of how they were implemented at one stage. Figuratively speaking, white supremacy was an extreme heat applied to a cast iron pan. The extreme heat being the actions, the legislation, the philosophy, the violence, the mentality, and the cast iron pan being the country. Again, this is figurative. Go with me here. The flame of white supremacy heated and maybe burnt the cast iron pan that is this country, this continent, what is called Australia. And I would go so far as to say that the heat has been turned down. In some areas, the heat's been turned off, and yet the pan is still warm. That is a way I would describe, figuratively, the impact of white supremacy on this country. My hands are a little dry from digging in the dirt, so it's difficult for me to roll this cigarette properly. Or with as much ease as I normally would. Do you see what I'm doing here? I'm being mindful. I'm not normally this mindful. Anyone who knows me will know that I can be quite quick and decisive with my language. But given that this is a video for all to see, not just those who understand me already, I want to point out how, in deep thought, I find it very important to, in my body, in an embodied way, reject ideas of better and worse, deserving and undeserving, good and bad, moral and evil, okay? In other words, I try and avoid black and white thinking. Instead of it being a better way to roll a cigarette, instead of struggling to roll a cigarette better, I'm struggling to roll the cigarette more effectively. Or with as much ease. That's what I said. Instead of rolling the cigarette better, I was struggling to roll a cigarette with ease. Why am I being so specific with my wording about better and worse in terms of rolling a cigarette? Well, because it's subjective. What I think is a better cigarette is only better to me. It might be better to other people, but I can only speak of whether it's better for me or not. Truly. Unless someone expressly asks or allows for me to speak on their behalf. Also, to roll a cigarette more easily might not be better. From one standpoint, it might be better to roll a bad cigarette that's hard to smoke, because then I wouldn't be able to smoke it, and then it wouldn't cause more chance of emphysema and lung cancer. Why am I like this? Why do I do this? Because I feel it is silly to ignore what I'm doing to myself or about myself at any moment. I find it's important to remind myself that smoking a cigarette isn't good for me, though I could say, oh, it is good for me because I like it. Smoking a cigarette is just what it is. It's smoking a cigarette. I enjoy it. However, the smoke will collect in my lungs and will increase my chances of emphysema and lung cancer. And I don't want to kid anyone who might see this, and if I was to say, oh, I like it, so it's good for me, then picks it up and does it for themselves, and then finds out later, like I have, that it affects your veins and results in more and more blue appearing on my light skin. It's not good for my circulation. It impedes my circulation because it gets in the way of my breathing, and breathing is part of the circulatory system, because breathing is how our bodies process humans and mammals and other such creatures with similar breathing systems, lungs, process oxygen into our bloodstream. Because without oxygen, our blood vessels fail to do their job.